And so we arrive then at the final game of this opening weekend of Six Nations action. It's good to be able to say that again. But this takes place on Sunday, and it is between Wales and Ireland as well. Probably the marquee fixture of the weekend in terms of these are two great rivals. Yep. And yeah, I would think so.
Interesting, because Scotland finished above Wales and England finished above Ireland.
I know, yeah, but I'm just thinking in terms of the ongoing battle that is this fixture, and the fact that it's been topsy-turvy over the last wee while, and Wales coming off a pretty horrendous year, Ireland in transition. It would be nice to see, with the roof closed in the Millennium Stadium, or in whatever it is, the Principality Stadium now, and with Wayne the best in the business, Barnes reffing, it could be a wonderful game of rugby, to be honest.
Has potential. Kicks off at 3 o'clock on Sunday, as you say, GMT local time, and yeah, it is. I suppose you could bill it as 2018 Grand Slam champions, 2019 Grand Slam champions, last two non-English teams to win the Six Nations, going at it. They have had some great games over the years.
They have. They know each other very well. Play domestic rugby together in terms of Pro 14 rivals. A lot of inside knowledge on both. It's it's a game that's not shy of colour at all. And just in terms of the colour of the game, we'll start with Wales, who are the hosts, as we have been doing. We're going to look at the broad things going into this tournament, what both sides are looking to get out of it, what the situation with their squad is, and I suppose then just the game itself comes as a secondary thing, because we're kind of looking on the macro first.
Although in this instance, curiously, this game does feel vitally important for both teams in a way, even that the other games aren't necessarily. Obviously, if France or England lose to Italy or Scotland, that'll be bad for them. Yes. But in terms of the macro picture, actually, this game will be front and centre in the minds of both Wales and Ireland as a very necessary one.
You can't. The adage is you can't win the Six Nations in the first weekend, but you can damn sure lose it, and that'll definitely feel prevalent in the minds of these two.
The stakes are high. We talk about this Six Nations as being sort of a diet Six Nations without fans. It's a maybe Lions year, but maybe not a Lions year at the moment. And there isn't a World Cup around the corner. They're very much in the building stage. But for these two teams, with both coaches running out of their contracts at the end of the year and both having sort of stuttering year, it feels vitally important that they have a good Six Nations, and with both of them still having England and France to play after this.
If they are to have a good Six Nations, it involves winning this game, and that's true for both of them.
And like we're starting with Wales, as you say. From their point of view, I mean, to say they had it rough last season is to underestimate it. I mean, they played, I think, 10 games, 7 defeats, 3 victories. The 3 victories, 2 over Italy and a stuttering win over Georgia, and every game against top quality opposition, tier 1 opposition, was a defeat. I mean, staggering
considering they came from World Cup semi-finalists and a robust defence with wily game playmakers and a coaching ticket that was there for over a decade, and one of the most settled and teams, and with all the nous and all the plays. They went from that to an absolute basket case in a matter of months, and it was really shocking to behold, and it was very concerning for the Welsh who were watching as well. But
one of the interesting comments I read from a journalist, someone who was talking to the Welsh coaches after the South Africa game at the World Cup, it was like, I can't remember the exact phraseology that they used. I'm not sure if it was Gatland or someone else on the staff, was saying they don't really have any regrets as a group, that they've wrung out this sort of sponge of this Welsh squad and got every bit of moisture out of it that we could. And maybe what Pivac has been left with is the sort of shriveled
dead sponge.
To try and
kind of one that's
get
been
the job done
at the bottom of the sink for the last 6 months. We should really throw that out.
It seems harsh, but certainly coming off of that, going into this season, it feels vital that they find at least some sort of identity and decide what type of team they want to be. I mean, one of the things that characterises this team on both attack and defence is non-committal to any kind of style, being very disjointed, leaving space where there shouldn't be space around the rucks, not attacking when they should attack, not kicking when they should kick,
not executing in a line as a unit, rather one person's shooting, the other person's drifting, and it's like, what are we doing here, boys?
Disjointed is a generous word for it, but it has been just messy, and likewise at the set piece, a bit lost, especially at the scrum. Really, really struggling against improving scrums, but it was actually a tale of the last time these two met in the Autumn Nations Cup. The Irish scrum dismantled them, Reece Tarry hauled off after 40 minutes.
And it was a scrum. It was an Irish scrum without the freshly returned furlong as well. So it's definitely that'll be a point of concern for them. They need to get parity. Is normally what Welsh sides of the past have gone for against scrums that fancy it is locking it down and making it not about that. That's something they will have to rediscover about themselves. Just how to be awkward. And they are at home and they are under the roof and they are a very tough task for anyone in the Millennium Stadium, and that's has to be the case for them. It has to be an improved showing from what they had last year.
Listen, from the point of view of the squads, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, I was looking at the side that did play that semi-final against the Springboks and pushed them all the way, nearly got to a World Cup final, just lost to the Springboks, and certainly gave them a bigger test than the England side did in the final. That side, 13 of the starting 15 are in this squad, 19 of the starting 23. There's a lot of playmaking talent. On top of that, you have Faletau coming back in, Dan Lydiot coming back in, who's in great form. They will have Liam Williams. They won't have him this week, unfortunately.
He's suspended, isn't he?
I believe so. That's whatever he did. I actually can't remember what he did, if he did something bad, but it wouldn't be out of character for him to be just suspended, I guess.
Yes.
He is missing this week. They'll have him going forward, but certainly in terms of the strength of the squad, there's a lot there to work with. Crucially, the returns of Ken Owens as well, who wasn't
a
in the
huge
team
leader
last
for
year.
them.
If it wasn't for Alan Wynne-Jones, he'd be a shoe-in for captain.
He is kind of deputy captain to Alan Wynne-Jones. He's just a big factor of, are we a wily, wise pack, or are we a bit of a rudderless pack with an Alan Wynne-Jones?
Yeah,
he can be a difference maker in that.
He's all about solidity at set piece, I guess. He's not really a set piece man, but he is about sort of locking it down, and he rarely gets schooled in that area one way or another, either at line out throwing or at scrummaging. What he brings is just a brilliant footballing ability, a brilliant ability to break down, playmaker, great
he's a good
hands.
passer,
he's like another Tipperick, or another, like, maybe not as versatile as Tipperick, but he's a super player.
No, he has shades of Dane Coles about him when he's out in the wide channels. He's obviously not quite as silky or as quick as Dane Coles, but he does have that recognition of space and that ability to go for a pass. And certainly the Welsh tradition in terms of rugby is to attack the space and to try and recognise tries, and their club sides do that. Now, their club sides have been struggling for all kinds of reasons, but they can still execute a try when it's on sometimes, which is an encouraging thing, especially for Pivac, who's wanted to see them play with a bit more tempo. We've seen at times in the last season, even in their losing efforts, that what he was trying to do, and we've seen them transition very, very quickly. Saw them score a great try against England off the kickoff on the second half, just 2 passes and then suddenly they're away. So it would be nice to see that kind of dangerous quality to Wales. Obviously not too nice from an Irish point of view, but that's definitely what they want to try and marry with a bit more solidity and a bit more robustness.
And Ken Owens just goes a long way to doing both.
He does.
So in terms of the squad that they're going to go for, I feel like the likes of Rhys Carey aren't an option. Wynne-Jones, their best scrumming loose head. They don't really have the luxury of options.
No, they don't. They
are
Wynne-Jones
struggling
is the
guy
props,
who can do it, who can lock down the scrum, keep him in there. I think likewise Thomas Francis, who did not have a good autumn campaign, still their best scrummaging tight head. I know they have
Samson Lee. Is he about?
Samson Lee's not about. They have Leon Brown and who else? Dylan Lewis in there. Dylan Lewis could get the nod, but I would err on the side of Thomas Francis for sure. I think Ken Owens has to come straight into the starting team. He's ready to go.
He's a great player. They do have Elliot D and Ryan Elias have kind of traded the jersey over the last wee while, and none of them very convincingly.
No. So I think he has to come back in. Alan Wynne-Jones to be partnered by, I would say, one of Adam Beard or Jake Ball. Jake Ball's the incumbent. Beard has been playing well at Pro 14 level. I don't see a way back in for Will Rowlands after his autumn form.
He was very poor in the autumn, and he had been good for Wasps, and he got in on the foot of his good form for Wasps, but no, it wasn't good enough. And even I watched a Wasps game at the weekend, and the Launchbury's out of it, and they were getting pumped by I can't even remember who, but it was Harlequins. Harlequins, we're getting pumped, and Rowlands was all over the shop, and he was there as well and missing. It was like, that's not the complete article at all.
And likewise, Corey Hill, I don't think is quite as good as the other two. I think Ball and the incumbent, they could do worse. Good scrumming lock, good hustle man, great partner, Alan Wynne-Jones. Adam Beard is the other option who they might go with. The back row is where it gets really interesting. Dan Lydiate has been Ireland kryptonite in times gone by.
Yeah,
he's in great form. He's coming back. He doesn't have any of this baggage that the current Welsh side are, and he does a lot of the dirty work. He does a lot of the tackling. He gets on top. He frees up space and time for the likes of Faletau and Tipperick, who might make the other two.
You want to get out in the wide channels on the ball.
Yeah,
in terms of
I would be very surprised if he didn't go with Dan Lydiate here. I know Aaron Wainwright's an incumbent. I think they're kind of looking at Wainwright as a potential backup number 8, especially when Faletau is as injury prone as he has been, and also getting on as well.
Yeah.
So I think they will go with Lydiate, Tipperick, and Faletau as a back row that has caused Ireland problems as a unit.
Yes,
obviously with Warburton in tow in times gone by, they have derailed slow Irish attacks brilliantly. With Lydiate doing the tackling and the other guys doing the jackling, and again that could be the picture today. So I'd be very surprised to see them go with anything else. Obviously Navidi is in the mix as well, but I wouldn't go with Navidi against Ireland.
Probably not. It's not the right. Again, horses for courses. You kind of want a tackle machine who's going to make those tight exchanges very difficult for Ireland, because that's probably where they're going to attack them.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the halfbacks, there are always options at scrummy for them. They have lots of scrummies. Gareth Davis, Williams and Hardy, all kind of similar mould of players. To be honest, all the Welsh scrummies are very similar moulded players. They try and set a high tempo. They're pretty frenetic, combative, can be good, can be bad at times.
It's key. It's vital, as we said with Italy, whoever they go with there, it's vital that they don't lean on them as a kicking option, because they're not kicking scrum halves.
Yeah.
It's not what makes them great. Bigger is a great kicker in the air. He's a guy who can make things happen. Those guys aren't, and I don't really mind who they go with there. It just needs to be about, as you say, the tempo, and their pack need to do them favours by picking good lines and getting over the ball and giving them good tempo. And if they do that, those guys can make good things happen in attack, and they can get a really lovely flow going. Especially Gareth Davis. I mean, he's my favourite. He was in our team of the Rugby World Cup.
Yes, he was phenomenal in the World Cup. He showed everything that a Welsh scrum half should be about, which was like prickly and combative, but also quick, lightning quick in terms of thought and action. So I would be surprised to see them go with anyone else other than Gareth Davies, but not wholly surprised. They could go with Williams or even Hardy. They've done so before. What I would be surprised is if they opted away from Dan Biggar. They have Jared Evans and they have Callum Sheedy in there, but as is the case with Sexton, and there are loads of people in Ireland calling for Sexton. He's too old. He's not going to the next World Cup, so you need to drop him. But it's like you look at the options in behind, and it's like these guys aren't test level. The only test level guy we have is Johnny Sexton. Likewise for Wales, it's Dan Biggar. Dan Biggar is the man for them.
Dan Biggar is not on the way out.
No, he's not.
I watched him the other week for Northampton. He's playing great rugby.
He's playing phenomenal stuff. And
he's a little between the legs passes. His distribution was awesome. He was throwing nice skip balls. Yeah. We know he has this great aerial ability, this great kicking ability, this wonderful test match clutch where you really get the sense that he's fighting for the jersey.
We've seen that for Ospreys in years gone by. He's done it in the RDS, kicking like touchline goal line or touchline conversions and stuff.
When the game is going away from Wales, even last year against England, their best showing in the Autumn Nations Cup against England, Dan Biggar was at the heart of it. You know, he was blocking those little kicks that England were trying to put him behind, chasing the ball. He was just being a nuisance, and while it wasn't enough to win the game, he really did show why he's the best 10. He's not out of the picture for Lions 10.
No, he's not. He's very much in the picture for Lions 10 in my mind as well. So yeah, I'd be surprised if they opted for anyone other than the man Dan Biggar. And then they have decisions to make in the centre. Obviously, they have Johnny Williams and Owen Watkin as options at 12. They'll probably go for Jonathan Davis.
Jonathan Davis will play 13. At 13. Nick Tompkins feels like a failed experiment.
It does, and he's just been a little bit soft. He is still in there, so he's still young as well. So there's potential for us to see him too. What's really exciting though is out wide. You have established guys like Josh Adams, obviously no Liam Williams, Bob and Diffuser, but Lee Halfpenny we've seen many times before as well. And then on the other wing you have a choice between your stalwart George North or your flyer Louis Rees-Zammit, the Gloucester speedster. All good options, to be honest. You can make a pretty coherent and cohesive back three.
North's form is okay. It's hard to know. They go with Halfpenny at halfback, Josh Adams on one wing, and as you say, North or Louis Rees-Zammit on the other, and the other one of those on the bench. So I think it's as you say, it's horses for courses. I wouldn't mind seeing Louis Rees-Zammit, but maybe this isn't the game for him.
Maybe not. Well, you're expecting Ireland to kick a lot to you, so they'll probably have someone who's a bit more vertically capable of dealing with it, and that would be George North. There's in terms of the squad, there is definitely causes for optimism throughout. potential for attacking rugby. Want to see a bit more cohesion. Good to see leaders like Ken Owens coming back. But the main point for Wales is just they need to be better than last year. It's a low enough bar that they've set themselves with last year.
Well, I don't think that'll be enough.
Be
I don't think that'll be enough. I don't think 4 wins out of 8 is going to be enough to save PVAC. I think PVAC they
need to win this game.
They probably need to win this game. I don't see PVAC taking them to the World Cup if they don't win this game, which is a shame because PVAC, his roots as a former Fiji coach and a former Scarlets coach, a guy from New Zealand.
Yeah, plays some beautiful rugby.
His roots are about good rugby, and it sometimes takes a while for him to be in charge of a team and for that to take hold.
Yeah.
Last season it seemed like they never really committed to it.
No.
In the way that they were always very reactive. They were always losing games. They were always kind of stopping the bleeding. And as such they kind of wilted to the pressure and just said the done thing here is to just kick the ball and we'll try and do that and we still have bigger. But they did that without really having the same defensive pressure.
No.
They had this bizarre little their defense was kind of all over the place.
It was
Nick Tompkins as 13 as the key defender was out of his depth as a young man.
Even a few times with Jonathan Davis, it looked like the system was completely changed, and none of them were leading any of it.
It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't. There was
one in the Six Nations against Ireland actually. This fixture this last year, where Ireland managed to create what should have been a try, but Ireland failed to execute in the first 2 minutes, and it was off first phase, and Johnny Sexton just did a little shaped to loop and just ran through a hole that should not have been there, but the two centres, one of them had drifted off and the other one shot out, and then there was just a big hole for Sexton to trip through.
There's all kinds
what's
of
going on here?
Attempted playmaking and not enough sort of cohesion going on there. They've also left huge space in the ruck. Every time someone gets a bit of momentum against them, nobody seems sure what to do, and then all of a sudden 2 guys go into jackal in their space, and it definitely seems like it's lacking in coherence. But they want to be an offensive team. That's PVAC's roots. They got to commit to it, and while it's a defensive game at the moment, I really do think their best moments period came from just these chaos opportunities where they showed that they have the skill set and they have the players to make things happen and attack.
Tipperick scored that try against England, the kick return. It was the first
right
play
after half time.
The first play of the second half kicked. It was Tompkins who caught it, offloaded. They broke down the right hand side and went up under the posts for a lovely coast to coast score. That's got to be the picture for Wales, and against a team like Ireland who are probably going to hold the ball a bit, kick it in the air, try and smother, try and make it slow. The way Wales have countered that is by being the team that can quickly click into transition and score and punish Ireland for not being clinical enough by being clinical themselves.
Yes, indeed. And the opposite of that happened the last time they played. I was watching that game between Ireland and Wales in the Autumn Nations Cup, and they Wales kicked poorly. They kicked from the base of the ruck. Gareth Davis was doing a lot of the kicking. That cost them. That I hate to see. But they had a few occasions, 3 occasions where they got a chance to attack, and on all 3 occasions, every ruck without exception was being tortured by the Irish Jacklers. They would get a decent carry, and all of a sudden it was O'Mahony, and then there was 2 Welshmen in trying to get him out of there, and then the ball was slow again, and then they went slow again, and then all of a sudden Stander was in, and it was disruptive. And you're going to see that again from Ireland. It worked. I mean, on those 3 occasions they got in, Ireland did concede penalties. Wales kicked 3 points, which turned out to be bad game management because they never really got another chance, and they lost 32-9. But from a Welsh point of view, it needs just that little bit more structure where players need to know where the ball is going. It's as we said with Scotland, and it's going to be a theme when we talk about attacking off set piece in those first few phases. If you find yourself with a line out or a scrum in opposition territory, you need to have a plan in those 2 phases, and you need to be able to clear the ruck and get quick ball. And that good carrying, picking a nice line, finding a soft spot in the defence, that's great. And then the ball needs to be quick. The scrum half needs to be there, it needs to be gone, and it gets easier when you do that. It gets easier to find fractures, and it gets harder on the defence. The quicker you manage to execute that, and the better you manage to execute it. And from a Welsh point of view, the likes of Lydiot, the likes of Alan Wynne-Jones, they need to be making sure that O'Mahony and the boys get nowhere near their ball, because it was way too soft. It was way too easy for Ireland to get in on top.
And it wasn't just Ireland. It is Ireland this week, so that's kind of the good one thing. But it was every top opposition that they came across last year. They were too sloppy on their own ball, sloppy on defence, just not
kicking game, not the same.
None of it was accurate enough to win any games. So it just needs to be tighter all round. But then particularly on offence, they need to be quick enough to punish Ireland, who will likely be slow enough to score the points that they do get in this game, and there will be chances there for Wales if they can set that tempo and commit to being the attacking, flowing side that Pivac wants them to be.
And it's about scores from deep as well. Like all teams, Ireland are tough on the red zone these days, and they're quite miserly when it comes to conceding when they're 5 out from their line.
But they could concede when you're 40 out.
That's the key, and that's like France exposed that, England exposed that with the Johnny May try from deep, and all those French tries that they scored in Paris. They just got outside Ireland. They managed to execute off chaos plays, off kick return. And what happened is Ireland actually, when there hasn't been a ruck for 10 seconds, Ireland get rudderless and they get sluggish and they seem very slow to react. And so Wales keeping the ball alive, keeping the tempo high. Ireland tend not to live with those kind of paced games. They like a slower, more controlled pace, and Wales need to speed it up.
Yeah, well, they've got the roof down. Got the roof down, exactly.
They've got indoor conditions. Indeed. There's no weather here hampering them. There's no excuse. They have to attack.
They must. And they need to be just far more accurate in terms of what they're bringing to it. And then I suppose when defending Ireland as well, as we said, they're without Sean Edwards, which is a huge loss for any defensive team, and their loss is France's gain, as we were alluding to. But you were talking about Lydiate returning. That could just refocus the minds on what to do to stop Ireland. Chop, poach, slow, and then they will kick to you, and then you're looking to execute off kick return and transition. That's the recipe for a good game defensively for them.
Ireland were able to find seams up front against them, which gave them the confidence. I mean, it gets very, very tough for Ireland if they can't.
No, if James Ryan gets chopped behind the gain line on the first phase, Ireland are kicking in the next two
phases.
There's
a lot of talk about how crucial Sexton is to Ireland's attack, and it is true, but all of it comes after a good carry off 9. And if you can take away the positive carries off 9 from Ireland, they tend to have nothing. I mean, there's no evidence to suggest they'll have anything this time either. That's got to be the focus. And you're talking about chop tackles, you're talking about getting the hands in, being as disruptive to their ball as they were to yours last time out. That's cool. I mean, from a structure point of view, I mean, the Irish Challenge is the perfect opportunity to be disciplined. I mean, they play off 9, they draw penalties, they kick chaos balls. The back three has a huge job for sure.
They do. Whoever they opt for in that combination, the back three and a combination of Dan Biggar as well, need to be establishing that pendulum ready for the high balls that are inevitably coming their way.
No question. But just in terms of stopping the multi-phase, I would be daring them to go wide. I mean, obviously we say this as Ireland fans, but we're watching it. They can't do it. They really can't. They can't go wide. If you want Ireland, if you want to give Ireland any space at all, give them space outside the 13 channel, because watching the Irish centres try to get it there is painful.
It is.
And you just have one guy try and shoot up. I would say the narrower the better. Dare them to do it. Have a block of players either side of the ruck coming flying forward, meaning they cannot carry around the ruck, and watch them. What Ireland are going to try and do in that context, 9 times out of 10, Sexton's going to try a crossfield kick, and then it's on your individuals in the back three who you do trust, your half pennies,
Josh Adams, or someone.
That's where you have to win those balls, and that's how Ireland will try and get at you. But honestly, I would just dare them. Do not let them get the leg up on the inside around the rucks. Don't let them take those meters off you. Don't let them get a head of steam up. Just stop them at source and dare them to do anything else, and they won't. They'll kick it.
They won't. I know. It's depressing for me to think, because I'm an Irish fan and I'm a fan of good, quick, flowing rugby. I think the game is about attacking the space, not running into the jerseys all the time. And yet I watch my national side run into the jerseys all the time. And I also think, we've said it before, there's no worse passing team in Tier 1 than Ireland, and there are many better passing teams in Tier 2 than Ireland too. It's true right now. They just are terrible at passing the ball.
Outside Sexton, it gets very, very sloppy. Now, hopefully, from an Ireland point of view, and we'll touch on Ireland in a moment, Ringrose will be an antidote to that to some extent. But from a Welsh point of view, I would say just dare them to do it and make your tackles and be aggressive. And Ken Owens adding that now at the breakdown should be huge. The scrum is also massive. They
can't afford a repeat of what happened in autumn to their scrum. They need to lock it down. They need to lock it down at least some of the time. Even if it's 1 or 2 scrum penalties, but not loads of them, because it was too much. No team can win. No team can win when a scrum's getting demolished as it was. So that needs to be.
And that's on the likes of Wyn Jones and Thomas Francis to make that happen.
And then if Ken Owens is back in and Alan Wynne Jones is in, I'd have no fears for their line out. I'd probably have fears for Ireland's line out, in fact, more so.
Indeed, especially considering how they struggled last year. But to move on from Wales and to look ahead to, at long last, the sixth team we'll talk about today, ahead of this Six Nations 2021, is Ireland.
Yeah.
They're playing away from home. It was kind of interesting from an Ireland point of view. I mean, you could say it feels make or break from Ireland. They're not quite in the same position that Wales are, where they're like they've fallen off a cliff.
It's also an away game for Ireland, so there's more context to it than that. It's not like it's not quite as important, although it is vital in terms of their Six Nations aspirations for this season. It's not quite as make or break as it is for PVAC, or like for Farrell as it is for PVAC. That being said, they could do it winning this game.
They're treading water. Like, it's been an interesting year. They did establish themselves as sort of the best of the rest with some good wins. They beat Wales. They put Scotland to the sword at the end of last season.
That was very encouraging.
Established themselves very much ahead of those teams without ever threatening to be on the level of England and France, and in those games,
and by extension
way.
Australia and New Zealand and even Argentina they were watching at the same time.
Indeed, like they're experiencing an identity crisis of sorts. I mean, based on last season, like there's a lot of talk of them being a team in transition, but it's kind of hard to know what they're transitioning from or what they're transitioning to. Like their best performances of last year all felt like imitations of the 2018 side. They all felt like they were edging the physical battle, they were playing a lot off 9, they were kicking effectively, they were drawing penalties, they were going to the corner, scoring bludgeoning tries from the red zone, and then, is that the plan? That seems to be the plan. When it goes well, everyone's happy. So if that's the plan, if that's the plan, can it be effective? How can it be effective against the top sides? Or are Ireland needing to add strings to their bow? Are they needing to add layers? Or are they needing to completely change the way they approach games? Because that doesn't seem to be on the agenda. Well, it's hard to know, really.
It is tough to know. They definitely need to add strings to their bow. Whether that involves wholesale change at the coaching level remains to be seen. Like, obviously they've recruited Paul O'Connell, which is a huge acquisition for them. I think it's probably the best move Farrell has made since his tenure, starting his tenure. Getting the line-out was a mess last year. We have a load of good young locks. You have James Ryan. You have even Henderson's not that young anymore, but he's not as used to calling the line-out when Dev was there for so many Dev Toner for so many years. You have guys like Ryan Baird now making his way into the squad, who's an exciting young talent. Lots of good hustling young athletes at lock, but very little nous. And compared to when you have an Alan Wynne Jones on the other side of the line out to you, you need a bit of nous, and having Paulie in the dressing room is definitely a good addition for them. But as far as like scoring, we mentioned it in the Wales thing that they're the worst passing team in Tier 1. It's very true. It's painful to watch them try and execute when, as we highlighted last year against England, they went 2 perfect phases and they had a try there to be scored if they recognised it, but they just don't seem to be looking for space. They seem to be looking to do their two hit up plays and then we kick here, and it's like, that's not rugby, lads. That's not how you play properly.
Indeed,
and it's never going to work.
Andy Farrell did a lot of talk about heads of rugby, and then what you witnessed on the field was something that at least looked extremely prescriptive. So it's hard to know what's going on there. Listen, from a colour point of view, going into the season, the calendar stacks up nicely enough. They don't have an early fixture against England on this occasion. They played them on the last weekend. They have this make or break couple of weeks here where they're away to Wales, followed by a home game against France. And France haven't won in Dublin since 2011, as we'll touch on next week. And it's a big point for France, but they might have felt that they put their Irish demons to bed last year, which they comprehensively did in some ways. But going to Dublin's going to be tough, and if Ireland get a win here and a win next week, however they go about it, they're odds on to be going for a Grand Slam when they play England at home on the last weekend, which is in some ways crazy to think because of how far away from the top level they seem, but these are fine margins at test level.
It is fine margins, and there are points of optimism for Ireland, more so even than Wales or Scotland, in the fact that their domestic teams are playing very well in their domestic competition. They are producing a lot more talent than we used to, in terms of there is now a whole conveyor belt of really good young players coming out of Ireland and coming through the Irish system. So they're not that far off in terms of they have loads of quality players, but the identity of the team, the national team, has been kind of wrong for quite a while. And as you said, are we transitioning from something or to something? Because what the performances last year looked a little bit like like Schmidt, as I said before, Schmidt ball without Schmidt brain there. So you don't have Joe Schmidt there, but you're trying to do sort of the same thing, and you're a bit less clever, a bit less subtle, and it's just very tough to do that on a sustained thing. You can get away with it against Scotland, but you're going to lose the next week. And it's a consistent problem for Ireland, is that if you're going to play that style, it was something that was cited going into the World Cup when they were just going through many, many phases. And it's like, as much as you're wearing your opposition down by doing that, you're wearing yourself down as well, and you need to have a style of play that allows you to score different kinds of tries. Like, I was bemoaning the fact, and I'm still waiting for it, because a kick return try from Ireland on the first phase, it hasn't happened in years. I can't remember one. One did happen last year, but it was scrubbed off for a crossing call that was dubious enough, which is a separate issue. But it was like, we still haven't actually scored that kick return try. All of our tries tend to look the same.
Yes.
You need to have different pictures to your tries. Like, they can't just all be crashing over from a maul from 5 metres.
They score a lot from the red zone, but it's like I say, Ireland over the last couple of years have been a very simple team to prepare for.
Indeed.
Not always a simple team to deal with, but a lot of the time proving for the top teams to be that way.
Yeah.
They are. Everyone knows what's coming, and everyone knows how to deal with it, and it's just a question of executing, not giving them the entrances to the red zone, not giving them cheap penalties, and not allowing them to get any go forward. And when that happens, generally speaking, they end up dealing with it, dealing with their threats pretty well. So from a squad point of view, though, from Ireland, just to pivot on, it's much the same. Tadhg Furlong returns to the fray, but it's much the same as it was last year. There's not a huge injection of youth. Although Caelan Daragh, who had come into the team last year, he's now out. He actually has concussion symptoms, which is an alarming enough one. So
concerning for a young number 8.
Yeah, I would feel like in that context, like where a guy shows up with concussion symptoms without a diagnosed concussion, like the protocols still give me the heebie-jeebies when you're reading about all this stuff with the Stephen Thompson stuff in the lawsuit and all of these early onset dementia things. I mean, a lot of the people who are talking about concussion and talking about it from the point of view of player safety want to go back to a 3 weeks out kind of deal. I wouldn't mind seeing a young guy like Daragh with these showing up with these symptoms parked for at least 3 weeks, and that's 3 weeks if he shows nothing else, if he's healthy for 3 weeks.
I agree with that.
So I think
the 6 day thing is absolute total hodgepodge. Like, it's nonsense.
They need to put Daragh out of their minds and let him be healthy as well. He's too young a guy as well to be
he's a prospect for the next World Cup. The idea is him going to the next World Cup. This isn't the be all and end all. Although it is 6 nations, as we said, it's not as important as a World Cup, and it's important to keep these players safe and obviously, not do damage to him. But in his stead comes another young talent, Ryan Baird, who I've mentioned before, who's in, and Gavin Coombs as well, another guy.
Quinn Rue's also out with a neck injury.
Yeah.
So there's that injection of youth, but I mean, by and large, the squad is going to pick itself. Interestingly enough, just 2 loose heads in Ireland's squad, despite picking quite a big squad.
That's odd. That's odd.
It is, because they have to be bubbled. So one suspects, especially when you consider the profile of the 2 loose heads in question, Cian Healy, sort of very much getting on and an aging force and struggling to get through games at times, and then Dave Kilcoyne just coming off a long-term injury. If either of those guys drops out, I guess they're going to be looking at moving Porter again to loosehead.
I don't love it as an option.
No, neither do I.
Especially when you have guys like Cronin and other guys in Munster who can scrummage.
Yeah, no idea why they didn't.
Byrne and Dooley or someone, and from Leinster there are good scrummaging props at loosehead in Ireland who aren't in the squad.
5 locks and 2 looseheads just doesn't seem to make sense.
No, and the many centres as well. The many centres and none of them Frawley is a concern.
Frawley is a guy you would love to see in there. But the squad is going to, it almost picks itself at this stage. Healy's going to get the nod at loosehead. Herring. I would love to see Furlong after last week go straight back into start. I wonder if they'll do it. It'll be Porter or Furlong, one or the other.
I wouldn't mind launching Tadhg Furlong off the bench either, to be honest, because he could slingshot him into a tight game and he could make all the difference in the world. Especially if he played phenomenally well for 40 minutes for Leinster last week. Looked all over, like doing at his best. He was monstering scrums. The opponent loosehead went off after 30 minutes because he was broken up from Tadhg scrummaging, and he was making plays all around the pitch. So he
did look great.
He was a monster.
Great.
He at his best,
certainly too big for that level.
Oh, indeed, But at his best, he's one of the best loose or tight heads in the world,
if not the best.
On his day, he's phenomenal. So either or.
I wouldn't mind seeing Big Tadhg coming in anyway, one way or t'other. What's interesting is how badly this Daragh injury disrupts what the plan is for everything else. Like the second row, they're going to be looking at Tadhg Byrne, who's been in good form, who I've never personally thought is big enough to play second row at test level, and not even big enough, just physical enough. It's such a tough position these days, and it really is one of those positions where you end up against your opposite man more often than not.
You do.
Like you're going to be facing down the likes of a Toji, Etzebeth, and for me, Ty Byrne just doesn't front up in that way. He's not physical enough. He's more of a back row forward.
Yeah.
Which is why what I'd love to see in the absence of Caelan Daragh is for them to stick with the plan, which would have been to move CJ from 8 to 6, because he's not really a number 8.
He's a number 6.
He's not a footballer in that way, and he's often a hazard at the base of a scrum, and even just the type of plays. I know people say the number of the back doesn't matter, but there's a skill. It does in some ways. There's a skill element to the number 8 position.
The number 8. The secret that Ireland haven't realised, like, even though Jamie Heaslip is the best number 8 we've ever produced and was a phenomenal distributing and footballing player, the number 8 is a distributor. Like your distribution doesn't start at 9, it starts at 8. It's 8, 9, 10 are your distributing guys. The 8 is the link between the backs and the forwards. He needs to have a passing game, and you see it with big Dwayne Vermeulen at his absolute best in the World Cup last year, where he was dominating the contacts when the carry was on, but he was also slipping lovely little passes, skip passes, drawing the men with his heft and giving the ball, which is something that CJ does not bring. No, number 8.
CJ is very,
and the
very
other
much
option that they might go for is Rhys Ruddock, who has been impressive in the Pro 14, but he's also not a distributing number 8. You need a guy with hands.
I don't really see Ruddock getting in. I suspect what they're going to do is either what I would love to see them do is put Henderson in the lock with Ryan, and then do CJ, Peter O'Mahony, and Ty Byrne at number 8. Yeah. Because I think Ty Byrne, there's merits to him as a back row forward. He is a good footballer.
He's a good jackler.
Quick speed. He's a good jackler. He's also revered in Wales. He played in Wales, and they love him and they fear him and they respect him. Yeah. And that's a dynamic. For sure, that's a dynamic in this game. Yeah. So I think I wouldn't mind seeing him get in as a number 8. I wouldn't love to see him in at lock. I don't think he's physical enough, as I said. But what I suspect they might do is put him in at lock, drop Ian Henderson, and then go with O'Mahony back at 6, one of Josh O'Connor's and CJ at 8, and I think that's a more rudimentary model for Ireland's pack, and one which we've had less success with and can be easier to deal with.
It's a small part of the problem. It goes to us being the worst passing team in Tier 1 when our number 8 can't pass and our number 9 does all the passing, and Sexton's at 10 and kicking mostly. It's a concern. We need to be able to move the ball.
At halfback, we've got Conor Murray and Gibson Park are the 2 front runners. Craig Casey's in the squad as well. That's an experienced gainer.
Yes, indeed, and it's good to see a bolter. Like, he's played great for Munster, to be honest. It's good seeing good young scrummies coming out there. I still don't know what Marmion has to do to get a look in, or to be honest, because
he's gone the way of Ben Spencer. He's done.
Seems that way. Connacht win loads of games with their backs and lose them with their forwards, and yet Ultan Delan and Quinn Rue get in, and Marmion can't get a look in. I don't understand.
I do hear you on that. But I suspect they'll go with Murray to start. I know Gibson Park had the jersey for a few games, and I certainly wouldn't hate to see it from a tempo setting point of view. But I think Murray's form has been decent. His box kicking's been on a dime, and I just think they're going to trust him. Yeah. Sexton is captain. He's going to start at 10. No arguments there. Interesting to know who'll come on after 20 minutes when Sexton goes down. Yeah,
when his hamstring acts up again, or the dead leg.
It'll probably be Billy Burns, which I don't necessarily hate, because Ross Byrne just at the moment sits way too deep and kicks and doesn't play well. Billy Burns at least is just like a foil for other players to work off, and he moves.
He's a little bit like a French 10, to be honest. Is what he is. He sits a little deep and passes, but he
moves the ball along a bit. He doesn't make as many mistakes as Ross Burns.
No, he doesn't.
I think Billy Burns will be the backup there. Centres is going to be Henshaw and Ringrose. Maybe Bundy Aki over Henshaw, but probably not.
Yeah. Aki hasn't actually been playing as much for Connacht. It's been Tom Daly of late. He's been out with kind of niggling injury, so it's probably Henshaw.
Ringrose. Outside backs. Interesting decisions to be made here. Hugo Keenan has locked down the fullback.
I would hope so, but
he's a quality fullback.
He's been brilliant.
When you consider how tough Ireland have found it to deal with the kicks in behind,
and they're coming off the back of having Rob Kearney there for over nearly a decade, which is just rock solid.
Failed so badly to deal with attacking kicks. You look at the England games and even the French game where they gave away that penalty try, and they need Keenan has plugged a lot of holes for them, and they need to keep him in there at 15.
They do.
And then the wings is a horses for courses. I mean, I'm not sure how fit James Lowe is. He could get in. Larmour, you feel like, could get in. Stockdale's injured for this week. I reckon it'll be Earls and Larmer.
Yeah.
If I was to guess.
Earls' form has not been great, but
no,
I would not be. He's never dropped for
He's
Ireland.
He's
just never dropped for Ireland.
Yeah.
But Shane Daly is another exciting talent who's in there as an option as well. I don't expect we'll see him in this game, but we might see him in games to come.
Probably not.
Maybe the Italy game. Maybe the Italy game is usually the thing, but from a squad point of view, as I said, there's a fair bit of talent, but there's also some unlucky to miss out. From the tight head point of view, or from just the people missing out, we have no Sean Cronin or Marshall for the hookers. No John Ryan and Michael Bent, two very fine tight heads who are missing out as well. Alan O'Connor and John Klein and Dev Toner, three locks who might have been there but aren't.
Indeed. It's the interesting one is actually at scrum half, where they've basically decided no Luke McGrath, no John Cooney. They basically decided Murray's the better footballer than them in that kind of mould, and then they want Gibson Park as a tempo setter and Casey as a young bolter to learn. So they've left a lot of talent out. No Caelan Blade, obviously, no Marnie, and no Cooney and no McGrath.
And then the other dynamic is 10, where all the backup 10s are not that convincing, and there are ones outside, you have Ross Byrne and Billy Burns are the ones in the squad, and then out of the squad you have Jack Carty, Harry Byrne, Kieran Frawley, Ben Healy, all of these guys who've played out of 10 and haven't quite got the look in yet, but it's still Sexton's the guy, but I suppose with that.
From an offensive point of view, looking beyond the squad, I said there's things to be learned from the squad. Like we've often talked about the potential benefit of getting another distributor in there just to allow Ireland to move the ball to expand the field and stretch defences. But it's pretty clear that they're not doing that. There is no bolter second distributor in the squad. No. So it's going to be flowing through 9 and 10, and so their offense, it's, as I said at the start, it's hard to get a read on exactly what they want to be right now. Andy Farrell's talked about getting them to play more heads up. There hasn't been much evidence of that in the play, but for me it goes back to that play that we highlighted against England in November. We talked about a lot already today, when they had that great hit up, great second phase, and then the third phase was another hit up before a kick. And actually, if you pause the screen, if you do a freeze frame as Murray picks it up, or whoever it was picks it up off the base of the ruck, there's all kinds of potential in that fractured defence after those first two positive phases. It's on Murray and Sexton. Now that day it was Ross Byrne at 10, and I can't quite remember who was at 9. It might have been Gibson Park again, young guy, only just come into the team. Without them, the reason that Murray and Sexton are going to be in there is to run the offense. You would think it's on those guys to expand Ireland's attacking game by noticing those things. I don't think they're going to try and change the script. I still think they're going to be about hard running, but Sexton and Murray need to move them into less constricted avenues. Yes. And the first phase can be a lovely Henshaw line picked between 10 and 12. It will be. It always is. Second phase around the corner, back rower is going to smash it up. All of a sudden it takes 2 to tackle him. Third phase, can we get the ball quick, and can Sexton and Murray between them identify where the holes are in the defence? And that's the only difference. Ireland just need to be able to move the ball into the space a bit more,
rather than jerseys.
And that's on Sexton and Murray.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah,
a lot of the time in the last couple of years, those two have been way too lax on attacking and way too comfortable just letting forwards do the work and then kicking the ball in the air. Yeah. And hopefully we milk a penalty advantage, at which point we can go chaos all time. It's been very, very one-out rudimentary stuff, and it's on those two guys to expand us and to start probing a bit more. And for me, that's the whole key to it. Apart from everything else, I know we've talked about Ringrose coming in and being more of a passer.
He does offer a bit more of a passing option than when he's out, as we saw towards the end of last year. They become very blunt because it's some combination of Aki, Henshaw, Farrell, and they're all not passes.
They're all kind of the same player.
Yeah, they're very, very physical on defence, very physical, and on the carry, not good.
They can
passers.
all offload, but not pass.
Yes, there's a distinction with difference between offloading and passing. If you have the space, there's a try on, it just involves a 20-yard skip pass or just a 20-yard spin pass out there to the wide channel off your left hand. None of those guys are throwing that pass, whereas Ringrose probably is. He recognises the space and can execute the skill. But we're not reinventing the wheel. What we could hope to see is Keenan's kick return acumen, which he does have good prowess in. It would be lovely to see us transition nicely and hopefully score some points off that. That's my key goal for Ireland, is to score a kick return try.
It's not happening.
Off the same phase, and it doesn't count if you kick return to the 22 and then 20 phases later the try comes. I want it to be a the first phase, run it in for a try.
None of the Six Nations against Wales.
I know.
Chances are of this game is going to hinge on the kicking game as much as anything else.
Yeah, there'll be Murray box kicks.
Murray box kicks have been good of late. They have been putting teams under pressure. You watched Leinster against Munster get really hard done by under those box kicks at times, and Murray nearly orchestrated a win for Munster in that game, but it proved not enough. I would love to see them try and work the pendulum a bit more. My suspicion is that Wales will be more than ready for the box kicking game. Yeah. They'll have bigger in position. They'll have Halfpenny in position. They'll be ready to make plays on the ball. Even Josh Allen's extremely solid in the air. Yeah. I think they need to be, as we've said, they need to be a bit more clever in terms of where they're attacking, and that goes for the kicking game as well. Like, they need to work the pendulum. They need to find and isolate. I think whether it's Rhys Sammet or George North, either one of those is going to be their worst high ball.
Yeah, and it's not just high ball. Like, both wingers have a tendency. Josh Adams too. It's just been true of Wales forever, in memoriam. Is that on the multi-phase defence, their wingers tend to just drift up. The pendulum can be disrupted, which is where a bomb isn't the correct option, because it gives them time while the ball's in the air to actually cover the space.
A lot of the time
finders,
what Wales will do is put Halfpenny and Bigger in the backfield as well. Yeah. And obviously that's tough, but getting Halfpenny up or getting Bigger this way, just disrupting it with some bit, like that's what I mean when I say expand the field, is make the defence defend the whole pitch. Yeah. Like make it
so much easier when you're defending in bunches around the ruck.
Indeed.
It's easy to make a tackle.
You have to have threats all over the pitch, and that's what Ireland need to bring. So it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's just about playing a little smarter and with a bit more leadership from the guys who are running the attack, which is Sexton and Murray. And then outside of that, I have confidence that the guys can make good plays, can carry well, that, you know, if the ball does fall to a Keenan or a Larmer, they will make things happen. And Ringrose will make things happen, but it's on Sexton and Murray to put them in the right places. That's where
I would also like to see Faith put in Gibson Park if he's on the bench, or even Casey if he's on the bench, to mix that up. I would like to see them given some minutes if it's tight. I don't think they will, though. I think they'll probably stick with Murray, but I would love to see an injection of tempo. And then what I'd be very disappointed to see, which is something we've seen from this Ireland team with Gibson Park at 9 in last year and towards the end, which is so disappointing. It was something that you saw a bit from the Springboks when Faf de Klerk first got in, where the scrum half's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. He wants to set a tempo, and the forwards aren't keeping up. They're not actually folding into their shape quick enough. Even though they've generated quick ball, they're on the front foot and they're just too slow for the passes. And like, I don't want to see that. I want to see a quick Ireland that, even if they're doing things a bit rudimentary and a bit like they're not using the full length of the field, still do it quickly. Like things like fundamental carries. Like we've seen them before. We saw them in the England game. You were citing it, that just the first up carrying, like nothing can go right if you're carrying so statically, and they were, and then they managed to fix that towards the tail end. They were better.
They're almost fatigued by that game, but it's fatigued by the rudimentariness, and then like after a certain point in time, you're almost staggering to the ball to carry it. Yeah, like one good dynamic carry is as good as 3 bad ones, if not better.
It's better, indeed.
So I mean, like that's definitely a lesson Ireland need to take for sure.
And the other thing is just in terms of a team's identity, Ireland are not the biggest, strongest, meanest team in the world. They just aren't. Sometimes we think we are, and that's silly. Like in terms of identifying your strengths, I think Ireland at their best are a very clever, wily team, and at their worst, they're the opposite. They go fundamentally stupid very quickly, especially if they're 2 scores down and chasing. They're very bad in that scenario. But at their best, they can be very, very difficult to play against because they keep their discipline and because they're quite smart. They move you about intelligently, ask you interesting little questions, and try and outsmart you, outwork you, and then ultimately outscore you slowly but eventually. And that's kind of their picture.
For sure. And like, listen, there's been a lot of high-profile conversations, and certainly the Ireland media, about just how blunt Ireland's attack is. What's gone slightly more under the radar is, like, in a year that rugby was about defence more than anything, Ireland's defence really, really struggled. It struggled to cope with teams who move the ball at speed and who tried to attack from deep. I mean, against England in the Autumn Nations Cup, I think what's the stats here? I have them. They held Eddie Jones' men to 39% possession, 41% territory, conceded 3 tries and 24 points. Pretty, like, when you consider that territorial and possession domination, 61% possession, conceded 3 tries nonetheless. Yeah,
it's no good.
Against France in the Six Nations, again last autumn, the delayed game, they held Labor to 40% possession, 40% territory, 36% possession. Yeah, incredible numbers, and conceded 4 tries and 35 points. Yeah. dreadful returns. Like they spent so little of these games defending and still conceded bucket loads.
Yeah, it's really bad.
It
reflects badly on your own conversion rate when you have that much ball and you don't score. But then when you're conceding that much and you're holding the ball for that long, it's crazy.
As you pointed out, they suffered for the lack of a Rob Kearney. Keenan seems to have come in and solved some of those issues.
Yeah,
he only got the fullback bedding towards the end. They also managed to get towards the end when they were playing Wales and Scotland, they managed to get a lot more disruption around the breakdown area. It's crucial for them. O'Mahony's such an important player.
It's a big part of their identity for years. They've always had jackal threats and breakdown threats. The breakdown should be a scrap. It's an Ireland-Wales game. The breakdown should be a dogfight.
They've struggled when they've let teams get tempo. And when they've let teams get tempo, it has been kind of brutal to watch. I mean, you look at that Johnny May try again, and like as much as a great try,
you watch it from a green lens, and you're like, tackle.
Yeah. Well, he does a stutter step on the outside.
Does Chris Farrell?
Everybody stops.
Yeah.
Farrell kind of falls over. Earls doesn't know whether to cover him or his outside man, and just freezes. And Porter is like way too slow to come across and isn't anywhere near him.
Tight head.
He's still in the line, and it was just. They just ghosted past them, and then from there it was just a foot race. He outran everybody.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was very, very easy. You look at the same thing in the French game. One of the worst tries. It was a beautiful try. Now I think it was an Entimac or Dupont who got it.
Oh, Entimac caught it.
But it was the one off the Sexton bomb, and we were hoisted by our own petard when Boutier caught it and just instantly moved it. And they were very, very sluggish on the outside. So listen, slowing down the tempo is important. Every team that plays against them, including Wales, should be looking to ratchet up the tempo when they have the ball. But like they do need to be able to move with a bit more speed from a defensive point of view, and just not be as soft in the tackle and not be as sluggish to react. The whole season last year could have been categorized as sluggish at times. And when they made the game sluggish, they won. And when they couldn't, they lost.
Indeed.
And that's definitely a huge work on for them, because those returns in the big games are very, very poor.
Yeah, no, and considering the head coach is someone who built himself on a defence coach things, those numbers need to be much better. Sure, you were citing England's numbers in terms of points conceded and how phenomenal that was. Ireland need to be a bit tougher to break down.
And I can't overstate how important Keenan's going to be solidifying up the defensive backfield.
He's a proper fullback. Instead of a winger at fullback or a centre at fullback, as they've tried again before. He's a fullback's fullback. He's very, very
But he is a young man. It's a lot of weight on young shoulders. You know, I suspect Wales
Lee Halfpenny has more experience for sure. There's definitely concerns there. And then just in terms of the set piece, I guess, we'd be hoping for a repeat of what happened at scrum time the last time with Porter there dominating and then having Furlong returning. You'd expect Ireland to have the edge. Wales will surely, and Ken Owens coming back, have addressed this a little and not quite be as brittle as they were last year.
I don't see it being a major area of attack. In fact, I don't see it being a problem this week, but down the line I have concerns at loosehead. I think Cian Healy's very much getting on. I think only having one out and out loosehead as backup, especially when it's a guy who's coming off an injury himself and we don't know how he looks. That's
silly.
That's potentially a problem going forward. But outside of that, they should be looking for solidity. Set pieces, and in terms of solving the puzzle, I think we've mentioned it a lot in this podcast, but I say it to reiterate it. In terms of solving the puzzle as to why rugby's so defensive, set piece goes a long way to answering it. And when the defensive line is necessarily 10 or 5 meters back, and there's either 20 meters or 10 meters of space between the two lines, that much is more when the chance to attack is going to be first, second, third phase off set piece. That's where you can get it. And I think from Ireland's point of view, just being solid at the line out and solid at the scrum, as it is for everybody, needs to be the key point.
They do need to be rock solid at the scrum. They have wilted a little last season, where they had been pretty imperious at scrum time for many seasons.
They're not
quite at that level. But
although Furlong could be disruptive.
No, he could be disruptive as well. But one thing that has to change is their line out. And as I mentioned earlier on, Paul O'Connell is a great savvy addition to the coaching ticket. Because that we have a lot of young locks, a rotating kind of group of hookers none of them have quite claimed the jersey fully. Like there are incumbents, but it's been shifting around and it's in flux. The lineout really hasn't been as dominant as it used to. They were very used to having Dev Toner in there, who made their scrum a little weaker but made their lineout pretty close to flawless. And then prior to that, you had Paul O'Connell as the player who was one of the best lineout operators in the world. We don't quite have that level of nous, but we do have him in the coaching ticket. It's good going forward to have the likes of James Ryan, Ryan Baird, Ian Henderson, learning from him, and hopefully this we'll see some good line-out play, because up against Alan Wynne-Jones it's a big test in week 1.
It is. Listen, after going through all of that detail and going on and on for, I'm sure, forever, I'm not quite sure how long, but I'm sure
quite a while, too long.
Where do you think this game is going to be won and lost? How do you think? Well, not that, but who do you think is going to win the game?
Well, who do I think versus who I'm going to say I think is maybe a different thing. Like, normally in this fixture I kind of err on the side of the home side is just favourites. That being said, going into every Six Nations I predict an Ireland Grand Slam, because I predict with my green lens and my heart. So I'm going to say Ireland edge it in a one-score game.
It's interesting.
But it's based on, Ireland were the better team last year, did beat them, are coming. The last time they met it was 32-9. In terms of the club sides, all 4 provinces are ahead of the Welsh provinces in the Pro 14. Now, that being said, a lot of this Welsh side are playing their rugby. A lot of their key men are playing their rugby in the Premiership.
For me, it's all about Wales. I mean, as much as I think Ireland, if any improvement, is going to be sort of incremental, slow improvement, and I think while they could get better and they could be very good, I think it's really all about what Wales bring, and I don't quite know what to expect from
neither
Wales.
do I.
But the evidence of what we saw under Pivac so far is a team that's just way, way beneath where Ireland are.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're bridging that gap. They should come out and hustle and disrupt Ireland, but I don't know if they quite have the confidence and cohesion, and whether the sponge has returned to any kind of...
Yes, indeed. Well, it's tough to see where that's coming from, because a lot of these guys, there's some young talent to come through, but like Alan Wynne-Jones is still a stalwart and still a key man. It's him and whoever else, and none of the other locks are on his level. And then you look at the back row, Lydiot's coming back in. That's as good as it could be, and he has been Irish kryptonite before. That's looking back rather than forward. Are they producing that much talent? You look at the backup 10s, Dan Biggar just has the jersey because the other guys aren't on his level. Jonathan Davis is still going to be in there. Lee Halfpenny's still going to be a fullback. Ken Owens is back in.
Yeah, it's very much the same old Welsh. But that Welsh team did get to a World Cup semi-final and has done for Ireland so many times.
It's tough to say because it does flip and flop, but the broader concern for Wales, and it was a concern even in the last few years, it felt like Gatland was keeping together a team and making them play to more than the sum of their parts, or to the ultimate, like you said, squeezing the most out of the sponge, whereas you were watching their provinces or their clubs be absolutely abysmal a lot of the time, and
you wonder if that's catching up to them.
You're still seeing their clubs be abysmal most of the time, and surely that does catch up eventually. You need to have good grassroots rugby to produce good top flight rugby, and maybe that's the story for Wales. That being said, maybe Ireland aren't clinical enough, and maybe they're a dominant showing but they only put 14 points on the board and then Wales nick it at the end. Is definitely
it's
potential.
hard to know. It is hard to know. I think I'll say that Ireland will get it done. I think they're just probably that bit better player for player, and then will make enough plays, and I think Sexton and Murray have a point to prove, and will come out and play effective rugby, and that'll be enough.
I hope so.
Yeah, so I'm going to say Ireland by a score of 19-10.
19-10. I'll say 22.
Look at
15.
you going high.
I'll say 22-15.
There you go.
Which is the same ish.
Yeah, well,
one
score game.
That's it. It's kind of classic Six Nations stuff in terms of the scoreline. We'll say that, and I suppose then we will move on
at long last.
And
Thank you for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to like and share with your friends. And if you'd like to hear more of what we have to say, please be sure to subscribe and click that bell so you get notified when we upload our videos. And please join the comment section as well. We like to get a fun conversation going here.